World of Warcraft is really great. Most of us, we played a more competitive type game before we got into this. You probably ran away from Counter Strike, League of Legends, Dota 2, I don't know, maybe Call of Duty, potentially RuneScape because you got scammed. You let somebody trim your armor. Anyways, the game's great. That's the reason that we keep coming back to it, and we're willing to do all these dumb little chores in the game so that way we can get to whatever part we really truly enjoy. Some people, I guess, they like the whole journey. You guys are freaks, though, if you actually legitimately like leveling. I don't know too many people that level for fun. Most of us, though, they want to do PvP. Maybe not at max level, but they want to do PvP. And the other things are just a means to an end that they accept, and it still is fun. They want to do raiding, they want to make friends online, whatever. World of Warcraft is a fantastic game, but I'm having such a hard time enjoying it lately. Playing Season of Discovery, it's just not doing it for me. I got burnt out early on in Wrath, but I was even feeling it in TBC. I feel like maybe one little part of what makes MMOs and maybe particularly World of Warcraft good is how you don't really get forced to compare your experience to anyone else. It's very unique, it's a journey. There's not really a ranking system. People will talk about parses and gatekeeping. No one really gives a fuck about that. Even most people who run really, really good raid groups, if you had straight 99s, they wouldn't think anything of it. If you had mostly 90s and they knew somebody in their guild who could vouch for you, they would take you much more seriously than the complete stranger with 99s. Yet apparently this game's all about skill and numbers and math and sims. It's a tiny part. I personally really enjoy trying to get, I don't know, better at doing more damage or running raid groups in a way where it feels like they more reliably go the way I want them to. But that's not really about some external validation and competition between people. It's just my own little experience I like having. I like knowing that I can get a group to get better week over week, and I can get better at DPSing on a class as long as I give a fuck about it, which in SOD I'm really not able to give a fuck about. And that's a big problem. I kind of feel like with the launch of TBC Classic, Blizzard looked at how players were claiming that the game's too easy. And then everything's getting released in its pre-nerf state. And we just see that populations get hammered over time, and guilds that aren't good enough fail to meet progression objectives quickly enough for everybody to get their loot, and then your friends will start making excuses about why they can't come to raid, but it's not that they just don't think it's worth it. It's always like, oh, my so and so died, or I gotta take my washing machine to the vet, and everyone gets upset with each other. It's sad. Most people haven't had the same guild since Classic. The average player is recycling their guilds and recycling their friends over and over again. And the biggest way that guilds die is that they're just not able to accomplish the content. And the people who have straight bis, they have literally the absolute best gear in the game, even the guys with legendaries and shit, they don't feel like they stand out. They feel like normal players. They may have believed, ooh, when I get Thunder Fury, when I get that last Arcanite bar and that second binding, this is going to change everything. And then you're going to get it and you're going to realize it's a fucking pixel, okay? It doesn't mean a whole lot at all. And I just think the game's in this state right now where it's being really well designed if you actually care about competition and having some kind of external form of judging how well you're doing. And I do think people need a little bit of that. Don't get me wrong, because there's a lot of players who have managed to play the game for 3 years and have only gotten a gray parse. Like, hey, if you've only ever gray parsed, you are 100% fucking terrible at the game and you're contributing to the friend groups you're in disintegrating because you're not able to carry your weight. But I don't think the game should be built in a way where that matters. You know, in Molten Core or to a lesser extent BWL, it really didn't matter if you had a bunch of people who sucked. Maybe you guys remember this. The very, very first weeks of raiding MC in 2019, 300 DPS on Ragnaros is pretty good. Yeah, I bet that sounds absolutely insane. And if you weren't doing like week 2 MCs, you're just going to literally not believe me. But for real, 300 DPS, that would be one of your highest DPS players in 2019. Kind of unbelievable. Let's explain a little bit about why that could be. Not everyone understood the mechanics on Rag. Do you remember when people would tell melee DPS to run out when he'd do the Sulfurin Smash shit? That's stupid. Most of us, not all of us, but most of us know that's stupid nowadays because it hits a limited amount of people. So everybody should just stay in, hit the boss, maybe stop DPS for 1 second when the threat drop happens. That was a huge contributing factor. Another thing would be people used to try to wear FR gear because they had memories that it mattered on Rag. No, FR gear was stupid. And then some people would say, well, no, you need fire resistance gear because the submerge phase, dude. It's meant to help you with the damage from the elementals. No, that's still stupid. The way you dealt with the damage from the Ellies, if you didn't submerge phase, was you'd stay away from them. You know, you'd kite them and you'd kill them a few at a time. You'd basically just prolong the fight. Not so much that Rag pops up again, but you prolong the fight, reduce how much damage the raid's taking, you peck off these little elemental mobs one at a time. But people didn't have a good understanding of that, and it made everyone play kind of wonky, and they sucked, and a lot of groups actually summoned Rag in early 2019 and then failed to kill him, which nowadays sounds fucking hilarious, but it really, really, really did happen a lot. And you got to remember, too, in general, the people who were doing Rag week 2, week 3, they're very good, all right? Or they at least are insanely available for the game. But there's some correlation there between people leveling faster and people taking the game serious and people being more performant players. And it was fun. It was fun and it was challenging. But even if it wasn't challenging in the way where you summon Rag, you fail to kill him, or you kill everything except Major Domo and Rag because you don't have a quintessence in your raid group. That stuff, it was fun. And then BWL came out, and it was a step up in difficulty. Firemaw, kind of rough. I'm honestly not a big fan of fights that require people to get like really fancy sets of gear for just one thing. It's not such a big deal if you make the tanks do it, so it's okay. But then later on, think about the raids that killed your guild or that you didn't like. Now, a lot of people had a fine time in AQ40, but that boss Viscidus, dude, that shit sucks. It's 50% of your time playing the game basically went to getting set up to kill Visc every week because on Alliance, you didn't have Poison Cleansing Totem, and so you had to get these insane consumables. That was terrible. Or what about Huhuran? A fight where you really shouldn't have everybody get NR gear. You're much better off just killing the boss faster and dealing with the insane damage from the poison bolt volley that way. But I'm sure you remember that a lot of raid groups, probably yours included, oh, guys, we need to get all this fancy gear that's expensive. Go spend all your free time doing things that maybe you're not as into so you can get this setup for just one boss. And then over time, you probably use less and less, and it's like, oh, what the hell am I doing? And this kind of, it happens a bit in Naxx too, with Sapphiron. And also, I would say with the consumes on Loatheb. These things are bad. I think that it's highly destructive to guilds because although nearly anybody, when you get them kind of alone, like let's say it's me, you, and 5 other people in a Discord channel, and I ask you something like, hey, are you going to have all your consumes? You're going to be like, yes. Yes, that's everybody's answer to that is yes. And yet in almost every raid group in the world, there are people skimping. They're trying to hide. Ooh, I'm going to use the less good version of the potion so I can save a gold. And it's easy to just call these people fucking losers. And in my opinion, if you're skimping on stuff and causing problems for other people, you really are a fucking loser. But that's just my opinion. But this is what's definitely true. It's not surprising that people don't want to do every single facet of the game. It's not surprising that most people don't get a whole lot of energy out of generating gold in the ways that you do it in World of Warcraft. And it sucks that there's this requirement for you to do it. And with later versions of the game, it's not such a prep check as it was in Classic. It kind of moves from a prep check to something much worse, which is a legitimate skill/attention check. Think of pre-nerf Magtheridon. That was terrible. You needed 20 people to understand how the stupid cubes worked, and if one of them messed up, everyone died. I mean, yeah, it's easy. And me personally, I've never fucked that mechanic up in my life, but I've ran dozens of raid groups that wiped dozens of times because you have one or two people who don't fucking get it, And I think that's kind of shitty. Think about all the guilds, and this sounds stupid, Phase 1 of TBC, all the guilds that died because they had issues with mag. I don't think pretty much any guilds died because they have issues with Gruul, but issues with mag. And then Tier 5 comes out, and people get hard stuck on Vash or on, what's his name, Kael'thas, fucking Blood Elf guy. That stuff, it could have been just a little easier, and it would have still felt good. I don't think it really... Maybe the first time that you killed the Tier 5 bosses, it felt a little special, but then very quickly, you would start seeing people on YouTube talking about how it's so easy and this is the way you parse, and you're going to not feel special anyway. So it feels like the trade was bad. The trade was so bad. You get a game that's a little harder. It's supposed to then reward you with feeling like it means a little more. But no, it's just harder. And it doesn't mean anything extra. It's like you're working a job and you just like the job less, but it doesn't pay you anymore or give you more quality of life in some other way. It's just worse, or it's just more difficult. And I don't think all on its own that difficulty has some amazing transcendental property that makes it a good thing. And it's just getting stuffed into World of Warcraft over and over and over again. And it's so lame. I've usually been running groups when I'm in them, so it's not like I've had the personal experience of seeing guilds die from shit being too hard. But I have lots of friends who've had that, or almost everyone I've ever recruited to play in a group with me. The story usually it wasn't that they were trying to upgrade from their shitty guild. It's that their guild that had some problem staffing a roster, and the reason that the roster would be an issue is because doing the raid undermanned would be impractical because it's too hard. And so the real problem was that they had a raid group that wasn't really good enough, and then some people quit on it. 15% of the raid group quits because they're like, fuck you guys. I know we're supposed to all be friends, but if I can't get this pixel, I'm going to tell you that my grandma died 7 weeks in a row. Yeah, sorry, it's crazy, man. I know, I've been going to a GDKP. That's kind of weird. But I got a lot of fucking grandmas, and I need to make this gold in the game. And then your raid group, undermanned, people start quitting more. You got to find a new guild. Not everybody can stick together because since the game's pretty hard, you need pretty brittle raid comp. So maybe you're a hunter player, and for some reason you like hanging out with the two other hunters in your raid group, and now you all got to find a guild. Do you think you're going to find someplace that needs 3 hunters? I mean, maybe if it's TBC, hunters pretty fucking good, but pick another class and it starts making no sense. Pick a warrior, pick a rogue, pick a fucking arcane mage, all this kind of shit, and you just see how it spreads out the people You have this annoying thing that happens in World of Warcraft where you get really tight with people, and then reality separates you largely because of issues with raiding. If the raids were really, really easy, it would still be fun. Most people's favorite raid is BWL, I think. I think that is the most popular raid for somebody to say, this is the one I like the most. And it's fucking it's cake, all right? BWL is cake. MC's a lot more cake than BWL. I think it's another big contender. AQ40, if you had a really sick raid group, you might like AQ40. Most people hated that fucking raid. And Nax 40, most people who played Classic never fucking cleared it, all right? I'm sure you've ran into this before. People talking about how they like raided Nax and they say shit where you're just thinking, did you actually fucking do this? Like, huh? Like, somebody will describe Loatheb as if it was the Wrath of the Lich King version. Or somebody will say the Saffron dot hit for like 1,000 a second. Or that you should use Frost Resist on Kel'Thuzad because of the tombs. And these are things that are just absolutely untrue. But to the point where it couldn't even be that you misunderstand it, it's you just never experienced it. And I've ran into this a lot too. And if you go and check how many people were raiding in Nax 40 compared to the earlier raids, it proves it. It's like a data argument. There are a fourth as many people doing this shit as there was doing the earlier raids. Most people didn't do Nax 40. A lot of people never completed AQ 40. It probably sounds crazy because the guys who actually go on YouTube and listen to a video 16 minutes in, like right now, you have a little bit of a fucking gaming addiction and you're really into doing a good job in raid. And so your personal experience will probably be that this shit's cake, and either it was cake for everybody in your group or you've swapped around groups a few times and you're kind of skilled at that. And it's just a skill that you've learned, but it's not really comfortable to go cold call fucking GMs and raid leaders and then join a group and have to worry about ideas like loot priority and how much people trust that you're going to be around. There's all these strange artificial problems that most players hate engaging with that get caused by making the game harder and trying to make it more modern, I would say. Season Discovery Phase 1, I think a large part of why it was good was they nerfed it just a little bit. I don't know if you remember this, but like the very first week or maybe it was 2 of raiding, they had higher, I believe it was magic resistances on the later bosses, and it made it difficult for people to have the DPS check get met on Kelris. And then they dialed that back. And so now you had a game where somebody was able to put in not a whole lot of effort up front, get into a raid, you could pug it, and you could full clear. When I've played SOD, the entirety of Phase 1, I pugged every raid. Every single one. At almost every slot. At most, I had 3 or 4 friends in a group with me, and those 3 or 4 friends would be very good players, but, it's still only half the group. And things were fine, and eventually we got our loot, and, if you got your Hydra Strike early, you got to enjoy it some more, but it didn't feel like some amazing item accomplishment that you could hold over other people, and even if BFD was 10 times harder, I bet it wouldn't have felt like that. There's just no reward for making the stuff more difficult. You just end up putting all the problems associated with game difficulty onto the player base. But players demand it. They ask for it all the time because they have no idea what they want, because they don't have a single fucking thought in their heads. I think a lot of it is to say that you want the game to be easier. Other people will conflate that with saying that you're bad. They'll honestly think that. Or this is an experience I've had before. I ran raid groups that were like top 50 in the world, and I wouldn't focus on my parses. I'd be parsing literally like 80s, 85s as a tank, holding threat with people getting high 99s. Huh, weird. I thought that a DPS who gets 99s would only possibly not pull threat if the tank's getting 99s. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. We have fucking coefficients that give us a bonus on our threat, dude, all right? And there used to be people that I had raid with, and they would think stuff like, oh, I mean, like, you're pretty good at the people management, but you're just like okay at the game. It's like, no, it's not fucking one-dimensional like that. Everybody wants to think that people are indoctrinated with the idea that skill matters and that competition matters, and they want to have this idea that they're better than other people. And it comes out everywhere all the fucking time. There's always people trying to do dick measuring in literally every single online guild, community, whatever. And they say they want it, and they don't, because everybody that doesn't come out at the very tippy top that cares obviously is not going to be super into it. This is the thing you're not going to run to. People who are into parsing who have never gotten a 99. It basically doesn't exist, and it makes sense, right? But you know what's funny is most of the people who are into parsing and get 99s, like basically all my friends, they're into the game enough that they will have a 99 on every boss, every phase, eventually. Eventually they will do it. And you know how they feel when they get that last one on the board? Phew, phew, I did it. Now, if I were to for some reason look at these logs in the next phase, I could say that I don't suck. They just feel like they're fucking average. All right? it's so funny. And this isn't shit talk about them. I feel the same way if I'm playing a DPS. I'm playing a tank, I don't give a fuck. Or if I'm playing a healer, I don't give a fuck cuz I know it really doesn't matter. As a DPS, more DPS does matter and parsing higher, it does mean something. But how unfortunate that this metric is in the game that makes almost everybody feel worse, but everybody has this compulsion to say that it's supremely valuable and that the game should be built in a way where the value of it increases, because as the game gets harder, it matters more that your DPS players put their damn hands on the keyboard and hit their buttons, all right? It matters more and more, and as you make the game harder, it makes it harder and harder to parse, and there's less and less slots at the very top for people to go and get those 99s, and it makes people less happy. But ever across the whole world and every single facet of gaming, you could even think it's in the real world of people trying to get more money so they can buy dumb shit that doesn't make them happy, and then they're upset that they're working more and that they aren't retired, and they go and they look at somebody else and are like, I wish I had more freedom. And people don't take the actions or say the things that will actually get them to those places ever, because you seem like a weak fucking like loser. It's terrible. It's so terrible. I don't believe in gatekeeping. I'm not saying that you should let shitty players in your raid group and have them screw up and dissolve your guild through their incompetence. No, what I'm saying is I really wish that people would want the game to be the version they like the most. They really, really loved MC and BWL and Phase 1 of SOD, and they really, really like it when the game actually gets nerfed. And yet no one wants to ask for that because you seem like you're pathetic if you do. Maybe you notice if you went to college. You ever took like a math class and people, you have a professor that's famous maybe for giving a low average, and then people who do well in that class will be like, I think he's fucking awesome. You know what? They're trying to fucking flex because they're pathetic. All right, they're fucking pathetic. Everybody in the audience for the most part is late 20s or older, okay? So any of you who went to school, I'm sure it was like far in the past. At this point, do any of you give a fuck about the idea that some of your professors were harder and you got a higher grade? Did you actually learn anything in school that changed your fucking life, where like this guy really needling you on the way you did something mattered? Probably not. And yet today in colleges, high schools, middle schools, private tutoring, private coaching, everywhere across the world, in America, Europe, fucking none of the audience is in Asia, but you know, this is the thing. People are into it. They want to make the claim that stuff should be harder, that young people have it fucking easy, that everyone's soft nowadays because it's a way to elevate their own status. All right? That's what it's all about. And for some reason, Blizzard wants to give people what they're asking for, even if I think it's not really what they want. I don't know how. To me, it looks like Season of Discovery is not a success. That's my interpretation. You had this huge surge of people come back, and sure, it was trickling off a bit at the end of Phase 1. Don't get me wrong. But how much of the trickle off at the end was people being like, well, you know, this gear's about to be useless because I have anticipation for Phase 2? And how much of the trickle off at the end was people actually being tired of Phase 1? If most of it was just people deciding that the gear was no longer interesting enough and so they didn't get enough dopamine from the raids, then I think that's so unfortunate. And it's such great evidence that people want to have the game have this illusion of difficulty, this illusion of challenge, and you'll just feel good all on your own. I'm sure there's people you played with before in raid groups who they did things in ways that were non-meta They weren't actually very productive. And yet, at the end of every raid, they'd have some weird story about how they did something cool that helped out. Like, there's probably some paladin that instead of, dispelling you on a, a Frost Nova, they gave you a freedom. Makes no difference at all, right? Getting your Nova cleansed off or getting a freedom, they're like, yeah, I'm on top of it, man. I give those freedoms to the melee when they get immobilized. Doesn't matter. An illusion of making a decision there. And it felt good for them. And maybe some of the decisions don't actually help. Like, hey, dude, sometimes being immobilized on a Nubricon. If you're a parser, you're into that. If you get immobilized on a Nubricon, then you can't get knocked up in the air, so it actually might increase your DPS. But I've been in groups before where I've literally said that, and then Pallies go and freedom people, which then actually lowers their DPS, and at the end of the fight, I'm sure the Paladin's thinking, I'm so fucking smooth. Look what I did. But you know what? That boss is easy, and it didn't matter, and everybody still felt good at the end of the day, because usually the guys who got freedoms didn't even realize that it took some of their DPS off the fucking charts. I just wish the game would be easier. I want to play Era, but it's kind of fucked up too. I've really been losing my passion for WoW lately, and it sucks. I want to really, really like the game, but it's just so difficult for me right now. I have a few friends that are on Era, and they've been trying to get me to come back into the game, but I want to really quickly describe to you what the real problem, in my opinion, with Era is, okay? This is the problem. If you want to play and you want to do any content other than Naxx, people won't want to take it seriously. If you want to do Naxx, what's going to happen? Raid leaders want to make sure it doesn't get screwed up because it's hard. So they're going to, I don't think gatekeeping is a real thing, but they're going to gatekeep you unless your character's already all set up. It's hard to run an LC or an SR group. There's lots of player churn on Era, and so everybody's just doing GDKP, which means that that's an issue too. You're going to need months worth of GDKP gold to buy stuff in a Naxx, because all the gold from the easier raids ends up in the Naxx raid groups too. This isn't a criticism of GDKP, but it's the reality of it. So the prize to be had if you play Era today is not great. This is what it is. You join a reliable GDKP group that clears Naxx in 85 minutes every week with no wipes, and you make less friends than in a traditional guild, because GDKP does have at least minor impacts on the way people socialize, because it does really take the mask off the game that everything kind of is about, like numbers and money. All right. And let's say you're hoping to get an experience like that, but maybe in MC and BWL. Well, here's the problem. If you want to do MC or BWL, people know they don't need world buffs, and so they show up without world buffs. You'll have your raid leader will be a tank wearing a bunch of tier 3, which makes no sense because we all know it's not like the best tanking gear anyways, but they're going to be in full tier 3. Maybe they'll have a Thunder Fury. They're going to have the orange items hard reserved, and no one's going to have world buffs. You won't be able to push yourself. You'll spend 90 to 100 minutes in this Molten Core if it's a pretty good one. It won't be a seamless experience. It'll be start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. It'll be different people in the run every single week because there's no guilds that are, or raid groups that are organized around it. So if you care about parsing or meeting people, it's not going to meet those objectives for you at all. And at the end of the run, you're going to notice that there was 6 Spanish-speaking mages in the group, and that even though all of them were AFK the whole time and did 0 DPS, they're still going to get their cuts because the raid leader knows that it's not worth their time to kick these 6 people, because if they do, then everyone in the raid will get an extra like 250 gold, and no one will thank the raid leader for it, and they just don't want the smoke. And so you'll just end up carrying people who don't care, playing with a bunch of people who don't care, making no friends, and getting hardly any gold because it's very easy content. And I think that sounds like hell on earth. This is what I'd want. I want to do Molten Core with some people who are serious about making friends and doing their best in a fucking easy raid. All right? I want a bad night to be that people missed their 99s, but they didn't lose their world buffs. And I want the raid to be under an hour, 100 fucking % of the time, with no parasites or assholes in the group. And I got some friends playing Era that have been asking me to come back. If that sounds fun to you, doing a really serious MC, and you have a level 60 on Horde on the North American White Mane PvP cluster, hit me up in Discord, okay? I probably have like 10 people right now that I know. If I can get it to like 30, then I think I want to make a serious MC group. I just want that. I want an hour a week doing Molten Core with the same fucking people where the environment is high skill enough that each individual raider could see personal growth for themselves if they want. They don't have to worry about somebody else making them lose their world buffs, but we're also not going to be trying to do a 22-minute fucking MC. Okay? I mean, maybe we'll try, but it's not about being the best ever. It's about being good enough that individuals can decide how hard they want to push themselves. But yeah, hit me up in Discord. My name's Jake from Tree. Peace.